We're Karen and Bo Christensen, a Danish-American couple who met in Germany in 2016. Bo is an airline pilot, and Karen is a freelance advertising creative director. In late 2022, we bought Château de La Tuilerie in Martel, France, and are working to make it a bed and breakfast and wedding destination fit for a queen. Welcome to Queen's Escape. We wanted to cook one of Eleanor of Aquitaine's favorite dishes, but unfortunately there's absolutely no record of any of the recipes dating from the 12th century. So we have lists of foods that they ate. We have an idea of the kind of things that the nobles ate and the kind of things that the peasants ate, and a lot of those things we wouldn't be able to get. So for example, swan, heron, peacocks, we can't cook that sort of thing, but that's probably what adorned her table most often, was meats roasted over an open flame and exotic meats that the cooks could then arrange beautifully. But we know that birds of the air were considered a very noble food. So chickens, they don't fly so well, so they probably weren't considered as noble as perhaps like a duck. So we have duck, and we're going to cook a duck today in honor of Eleanor, very simply based on how she might have had it. Now, if we were going to be 100% authentic, we would take these ducks and we would put them on a spit and we would roast them on an open fire. But Bo told me that's probably not a good idea because we don't exactly have the equipment for that. So we will bake the duck in the oven and we will just pretend that it was roasted on an open fire. Now, almost all we know about medieval cuisine has been derived from Western sources, and the oldest surviving culinary manuscript from Christian Europe was most likely composed in the first half of the 13th century. And this was 100 years after Eleanor was born, so we can't really be sure if they were eating the same things 100 years later. France was dominated by power relations and control by religion and a well-defined social class hierarchy in medieval society, and they viewed food in the same way. So there were some foods that were nobler to eat and some that were more peasantly to eat. Their qualities and nutritional virtues were considered based on the natural elements, so everything that came close to heaven and therefore to God was particularly sought after. In contrast, anything under the earth was considered rude. So the people of that time, they had this elaborate gastronomic code based on the elements. So you have the four elements. You have fire, air, water, and earth. And the thought was that fire was the noblest element. Air was the second noblest. Water was the third. And then earth was at the very bottom. So anything that was grown inside the earth, like root vegetables or close to the earth, this was peasant food. This was not for the royals. So we're talking, carrots, onions and garlic were particularly offensive. They didn't have potatoes. Those arrived in the 16th century later. So anything on or close to the earth, cabbage, for example, this was not really desirable food. Cereals, breads, and fruits were a little bit more acceptable because they grew up out of the earth and into the air. And then the second least desirable element was water. And so anything that came out of the water, fish, for example. These are not as lowly as the carrots and the root vegetables and anything in the earth, but the fact was that 2 or 3 times during the week they weren't allowed to eat meat for religious reasons, so they had to eat fish. And because they were eating fish so much, they kind of didn't really prize fish. So earth vegetables were the lowest, water animals and vegetables were the second lowest, and then we come to air. Birds that flew in the air were considered quite desirable. And then food that was associated with fire, that could be cooked on a fire, were also desirable. Nobility preferred meat roasted. It was the best food for sustaining strength, and it became a symbol of power. Game, in particular, was desired because it was the product of hunting, and this is a warrior-like ability. It was common that dishonored knights, they might be asked to give up their arms, but also they might be asked to give up eating meat, because this was associated with being noble or being respected. So birds that fly in the air were very popular. Heron, swan, peacock. These were often favored by those who would cook for the nobles because they could be presented in a grand way, with their long necks and their feathers. The highest regarded animals were the phoenix and the salamander, but of course, these are mystical. I see a heron this morning on my walk. Back in Eleanor's day, that would have been a nice choice for dinner. So on the table we have the chopped up duck, and you would also see on our plate some vegetables, which include potatoes and carrots and beans and peas. You really wouldn't see this on Eleanor's plate because anything that grew close to or in the ground, like root vegetables, was considered lower class, and potatoes weren't even introduced to France until the 16th century. But we wanted to have a vegetable, and that's what we could have. Part of Eleanor's territory included Bordeaux. We stuffed the duck with apples and with raisins, because these were 2 fruits that were available during the 12th century.
Cheers.
Cheers to Eleanor.